This watch costs $80. This one costs $50,000. And at arm's length, they're the same watch. Black dial. A rotating 60-minute bezel. Fat glowing dots for hours. And that same odd hour hand with a little circle punched into it. Look down any street, any airport, any watch shop, and you'll see the same face staring back at you over and over on watches that cost less than a dinner and watches that cost more than a car. Now, most people assume that's laziness, that watchmakers just can't be bothered to think of anything new, so they all rip off Rolex. And that's wrong. What you're actually looking at is one of the most quietly astonishing stories in design. The story of how a single watch from 1953 solved its problem so perfectly that it stopped belonging to anyone. It stopped being a Rolex or a Blancpain and became something closer to a shape everyone is simply allowed to use, like a road sign or the layout of a keyboard. To understand how that happened, we need to crack 3 questions. 1. Why do all dive watches look the same? And I promise you, the answer isn't laziness. 2. How does a design leap from one brand to every brand, legally? And 3. Who actually invented this thing? Because 70 years on, 2 of the biggest names in watches are still fighting about it, and it gets ugly. Stick around, because by the end we'll come back to these 2 watches, the $80 one and the $50,000 one. And you'll see exactly why they're twins. The principle. Nothing here is decoration. Let's go back to 1953, and let's be clear about what a dive watch actually was back then. It wasn't jewelry. It wasn't a fashion statement. It was survival gear. Because in 1953, there were no dive computers. None. When you were underwater, a single piece of equipment answered the one question that could kill you. How long have I been down here? And when do I have to come up? Run out of air or come up too fast, and you're dead or seriously hurt. So, every part of this watch, every single icon you think of as the look, was invented to answer that question. Here's the idea that holds this whole video together. Nothing on this watch is decoration. Every element is a tool, and that right there is the reason the whole world copies it. Because when you copy the look, you're not copying a style, you're copying the right answer to a problem that never changed. Let me show you the anatomy. Watch how every iconic feature is really just a solution wearing a disguise. That rotating ring around the edge, the bezel, is a stopwatch with no battery. At the start of your dive, you twist it so the triangle lines up with the minute hand. From then on, a glance tells you how long you've been under. No buttons to push because buttons mean holes and holes let water in. The black dial with those big glowing markers, that's maximum contrast, so you can read it instantly in dark, murky water 30 meters down. That strange hour hand with the circle, often called the Mercedes hand, the most accepted explanation is beautifully practical. The circle holds more glowing material, and its odd shape lets you tell the hour hand apart from the minute hand at a glance. In the dark, when confusing the two could cost you. Even the little glowing dot on the seconds hand has a job. It's your proof of life. One glance, it's sweeping. The watch is alive. You can trust the time it's showing. And the case and that screw-down crown seal the whole thing against water. A waterproof foundation Rolex had actually been building since 1926. So think of it less like a watch and more like a tool that became an icon, the way a paperclip or a pair of scissors did. Somebody solved the problem so well that the right shape simply froze in place. And every copy since inherits that shape because the physics underneath never changed. And here's the first surprise. This didn't come from one genius brand. 1953 was a moment when 3 watchmakers arrived at almost exactly the same answer at almost exactly the same time. Blancpain with the 50 fathoms, Rolex with the Submariner, and a third name most people have completely forgotten. Zodiac with the Seawolf. 3 companies. 1 year. The same idea. So if every part is a tool, then copying the look really does mean copying the solution. But that raises a puzzle. If the design was this good from 1953, why did the flood of copies only really explode decades later? The answer is one word, and it's hiding in a patent office. The core, the package. We're going to watch a watch turn into a rule, one step at a time. Start with what 1953 actually delivered. A complete underwater instrument and every piece chosen for the water. A waterproof case. A screw-down crown to seal it. A rotating bezel to time the dive, with no battery and no buttons to breach the case. And a dial built for one thing, being read instantly in the dark. Put together, it was a mechanical dive computer you could strap to your wrist, and the submariner launched rated to 100 meters, which in 1953 was a serious number for a production watch. That silhouette, case, crown, bezel, glowing dial, is what your brain now calls a dive watch. Hold that thought, because we're about to watch it escape. But a brilliant tool that can be misread is dangerous. And that flaw is what the next piece exists to fix. The fail-safe bezel. Here's a problem that sounds tiny and is actually lethal. Your bezel is timing your dive. Now imagine it gets knocked and spins while you're underwater. If it can rotate freely in both directions, it might tell you less time has passed than really has. So you stay down longer thinking you've got air and safety margin you don't. That mistake kills people. The fix is gorgeous in its simplicity. Make the bezel turn one way only, anti-clockwise. Now if it gets knocked, it can only ever tell you that more time has passed than really has. Worst case, it sends you up early. It's a mistake that saves your life instead of ending it. Think of it like a fire door that only opens outwards. The design itself makes the dangerous error impossible. And here's where I have to be scrupulously fair, because this is where everyone oversimplifies. That one-way bezel? That was Blancpain's idea, not Rolex's. But the watch that became a planet-wide phenomenon, the one whose name you say without thinking, that was Rolex's. Neither one simply copied the other. They converged on the same problem at the same moment and split the honors. Anyone who tells you a clean X copied Y story is selling you something. And now the word that was hiding in the patent office. Blancpain didn't just invent that unidirectional bezel, they patented it. And according to watch historians, they held that patent until 1983. Think about what that means. For roughly 30 years, that life-saving one-way bezel, the single most defining feature of a dive watch, legally belonged to one company. Everyone else had to make do. So, that's half the reason the copies took decades to explode. The other half is that somebody wrote the whole design down and turned it into a standard when the archetype became a requirement. In 1996, the design got codified into an international standard called ISO 6425, the rulebook for what a watch is allowed to call itself, a diver's watch. And look at what the rulebook demands: water resistance of at least 100 meters, legibility in the dark, and a unidirectional rotating bezel with a 60-minute scale, marked at least every 5 minutes with a triangle to set your start point. Read that list again. That isn't a list of rules someone invented in 1996. That's a description of the 1953 watch. The archetype had become so completely the right answer that the world simply wrote it down and made it the definition. Form didn't just follow function anymore. Function had become law. It's like a plug socket or a road sign. Once the shape becomes the standard, everything has to fit the same mold. Not by force, but because stepping outside it stops making sense. So now we've got two forces stacking up. The key patent runs out. The design becomes the official standard. Put those together and something inevitable happens. The design that belongs to everyone. Once that Blancpain patent expired and once the standard had effectively defined the archetype in the open, the 1953 dive watch became something almost no design ever becomes. It belonged to everyone. Nobody could own the whole thing anymore, and so everybody made it. Steinhardt, Squale, Seiko, Invicta, Tudor, which, and this is delicious, is owned by Rolex itself. A whole economy appeared with a name. The Homage, a watch that wears the 1953 look openly under a different brand at a fraction of the price. An Invicta Pro diver at around $80 running a Seiko movement gives you almost the entire visual package of a submariner for a tiny sliver of the cost. And that's how you get our two watches from the start. At the bottom, an $80 Homage. At the top, a vintage submariner or 50 fathoms worth tens of thousands. An original 1953 50 fathoms sold at auction for $30,000. For the price of one vintage submariner, you could buy something like 90 entry-level dive watches that look at arm's length exactly the same. It's the QWERTY keyboard of watch design. Nobody owns it. Everybody uses it. And changing it now would just be perverse. So that's why your two watches, the $80 one and the $50,000 one, are twins at arm's length. It isn't laziness. It's what happens when a design solves the problem so well that it stops belonging to anyone and starts belonging to everyone. Which leaves the messiest question of all. If this design belongs to everyone now, who invented it in the first place? Because two giant companies have been fighting about that for 70 years. And that fight tells you where tribute quietly turns into theft. Connection, the feud, and where tribute ends. First, this is closer to you than you think. Look around at the wrists near you. Your uncle's Seiko, a friend's Casio in diver style, a cheap Invicta, even the dive watch face on a smartwatch. They're all speaking the language written in 1953. And here's my favorite part. You have almost certainly used a dive bezel yourself to time a pizza in the oven or a parking meter with no idea you were using survival technology built to stop people dying underwater. From now on, you'll spot 1953 everywhere. Now, the fight. And I'm going to give you the facts and let you referee because both sides have skin in the game and the truth is genuinely tangled. The question is simple. Who made the first modern dive watch? Rolex or Blancpain? Blancpain got to market first. Their 50 fathoms was out in 1953, while the Submariner didn't actually go on sale until 1954. So Blancpain can fairly claim first mover. But there's hard evidence the Submariner was already in production in 1953, and a Rolex director later claimed he'd personally tested a Submariner prototype down to 50 meters as early as 1951. Skeptics accuse Blancpain of inflating its story decades later. Blancpain points to its own founder, a diving-obsessed executive who'd nearly died running out of air, as the true origin. And honestly, there's no clean winner. Two companies solved the same problem at almost the same moment, and 70 years of marketing has muddied everything since. So, I won't hand you a verdict because anyone who does is probably selling a watch, but that fight points at a line you should be able to draw. The line between homage and fake. And Homage wears the 1953 look proudly but tells the truth. It says Steinhardt or Seiko or Invicta on the dial. It's legal and it's honest. A fake, a Rolex, puts the Rolex name on a watch Rolex didn't make. That's not tribute, that's fraud. Same face, completely different act. One is a language everyone's allowed to speak, the other is forging someone's signature. So, back to our two watches. The $80 one. A genuine, honest descendant of 1953. Same bezel logic, same high-contrast dial, same failsafe built in. It's speaking the language, and it's allowed to. The $50,000 one, an original or close to it, from the exact moment three companies stumbled onto the same perfect answer, before a standard, before a single copy existed. Same face, same logic, 100-fold apart in price. Not because anyone was lazy, but because in 1953, somebody drew the right answer so well that it stopped being a watch and became a language. And now everyone speaks it. And notice we only talked about diving. There's another tool watch that got copied almost as relentlessly, the pilot's chronograph. Its story runs all the way to the surface of the moon. But that's a video for another day. So here's my question for the comments. Look at the watch on your wrist right now. Is it speaking 1953? Bezel, contrast dial, glowing hands. How much of that 70-year-old survival kit is sitting on you at this exact moment? Tell me what you found. And if this changed how you see the watches around you, the subscribe button costs nothing and genuinely helps the channel. There's a card on screen for our breakdown of exactly how to use a dive bezel, the survival tool hiding on millions of wrists that almost nobody knows how to work. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.